Welcome to the 20th episode of the Forgotten Fields Project. This time we focus on the historic 250th commemoration of the American Revolution, which of course Virginia played a major role in. I'm Robin Reed.
And I'm Tara Williamson.
And I'm Chuck Miller.
And in this episode, we're going to do something just a little bit different. We're going to take a look at the highlights of the efforts of the Virginia historians to remember the American Revolution as it affected Botetourt County agriculture.
Well, in terms of agriculture, I think it's probably the location and the events. The location early on was I guess you'd say at the southern end of the Shenandoah Valley and the gateway to the west within the frontier era of 250 years ago. And I think, again, that proved itself as time went along when transportation and industry and population changed. Early on, if you look, Botetourt County, or what is today Botetourt County, provided the basis for, especially in terms of agriculture, were grains and hemp and things that it took to endure. And I guess, in essence, even the ironworks early on, making rifles and tools for settlers and for pioneers to carry west. And then as time went along, when the railroad came and industrial things made Roanoke exist, and Botetourt County became more of a breadbasket type of thing, providing fruit and produce and such things to sustain a more urban or less rural population.
Our very own Tara Williamson gave a presentation that did a deep dive on this particular subject. And Tara, Chuck, and I have some questions about your presentation, so let's do a little interview and find out about some of your key takeaways. Would you mind starting with what drew people to settle in this area?
Well, so we're going to be looking at let's start in the very, very late 1600s, extremely early 1700s. People are coming over, and it is claustrophobic up north now in Pennsylvania, around Philadelphia-ish area. You can't find land anywhere. There are tons of people trying to settle the area. So you have a lot of, especially Germans up there and Scots-Irish, they're looking for places to settle. There's no room, so they're squeezed down south. So they start taking this huge road, the Great Wagon Road, or otherwise known as just the Great Road, and it's 435-mile-long road that stretches from Philadelphia, down Shenandoah Valley, towards Roanoke, then east over the Blue Ridge, then south North Carolina. It keeps going down into Carolina and Georgia. And so they get up top there from the north, up by Philadelphia, and they just start coming down. Now, this road wasn't anything like we're used to now. It wasn't actually even a very well-defined road or very established. It was just a general path you would take towards the southern region. And so they start on it. And the funny thing is, it's called the Great Wagon Road, but these people didn't have wagons either. We're talking about just hoofing it on hoof, essentially, bare down all the way down here. So they start making it down, get to Northern Virginia, they get a little bit more southern, and they try to go east. But everything's completely clogged up out east. You have these huge plantations, land's already parceled off, it's completely taken. So they have to go a little bit west, and so they end up here in this beautiful valley, right in Shenandoah Valley and down. And so they say, this is good enough, we're going to try. And then, of course, you know how that normally goes. This is history of farming, after all, so it's not going to be easy by any stretch. They hit some obstacles. There's a little bit of turmoil there. They hit some Native Americans that were a little hostile, of course, as they're coming into your territory. Massive encroachment. So settling was extremely difficult. And so even in 1760, William Byrd, he led an expedition against the Cherokee, tried to improve the old Buffalo Trail, and turn it into an actual wagon road. It was the first major road improvement, but it was still very difficult to navigate, very difficult to stay here.
My name is Chief Wren Herdman, and I am the chief of the Central Appalachian Cherokee Tribe. We're more concerned about making sure that history is taught in truth. especially in Southwest Virginia and especially with the Cherokee tribe, because they don't get a lot of correct, educational understanding about the Cherokee that were in the area. So we want to make sure that we clarify that, not only just so that the children can know that they may have something to do with the history of the Cherokee and their own family lineage, but also so that they will know that, we have to make better decisions as we move forward. And if you don't teach history and truth, the next generations can't do that. So that's really why we do what we do. It's a real problem, especially for Native Americans, and especially for the woodland Indians that are on this side of the country, because historically, they've been assimilating since the 1600s and trying to survive. And it was a very hard time. Of course, everybody is trying to survive. But a lot of times the details of what happened with the Native Americans in Southwest Virginia gets lost in that story. Even when I go around and I look at some of the museums that are in and around Southwest Virginia, their history will start with the settlements, the colonial settlement. And it's like, well, you just took out thousands of years that were right here on this land that needs to be told correctly.
My great grandfather was in fact Colonel William Preston.
For reals?
Mm-hmm. I was reading a little bit about him and his play, and was very significant.
Yeah.
In Virginia, and a lot of his offspring were like governors, and it was really interesting, that piece of it. And additionally, it's also intriguing to me to know that where I ended up living for the last 20 years, he had a place called Greenfield.
Yeah.
Plantation that wasn't very far from here, and then to have the significance of his Smithfield plantation turned into a school for agriculture is really cool and weird.
On paper, you're going to see that farms were 100 acres in size, maybe a little bit larger than that, but in reality, and they're about 100 to 400 acres that we're talking about back when this was going on, very late 1700s. And that's just on paper. In reality, these things are only about 10 to 12 acres of actual usable, arable, open land. So the tracts may have been large, but they were actually very small areas that were physically farmed. But another way was actually the corn right, and that was brand new that I had learned about. So that was any settler who cultivated 1 acre of corn would have received a title to 100 acres of land. So the exact number of farms in Botetourt kind of prior to the revolution's unknown, but it's probably reasonable to assume that most everyone was involved in some form of agriculture, mainly also for just to sustain themselves and their families. So you're talking about very home-based operations everywhere.
That seems like a pretty sweet deal.
It does, right? Yeah. Yeah, unless you're in a drought, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, since you'd mentioned corn, also makes me wonder what other kind of crops were historically grown.
The biggest thing during that time frame, and we're still in the very late 1700s to early 1800s, were going to be field crops. So definitely the most important was wheat for bread making. And you probably, of course, you go everywhere and it's Old Mill Road. Yeah, I think there's like 1 million Old Mill Roads, I think, by default in every single county around here. Miller's Mill was the first one here. But wheat was definitely the most important. And it was, back then it was used to actually make a type of flour in combination with rye. It was called maslin, so it was a European flour. And so they would, of course, ship that back over. Besides that, corn, but corn was primarily for livestock feed, of course, similar to how it is right now in today's day. Now, the yields I thought were fascinating. Other crops that they had. So we're talking about wheat and rye. Back then, it was about 8 to 12 bushels of wheat or rye per acre. Compare that to nowadays, where it's 53.3 for wheat and 32 for rye. And the more staggering difference is corn. Corn back then, 12 to 17 bushels per acre, where nowadays it's 186.5 on average. So,
wow.
Isn't that, yeah, puts it into perspective, especially when we're only doing so little acreage. So,
what other kind of agricultural livelihoods would they have been doing?
Another big one was actually their fiber, flax was huge around here. We're actually one of the largest markets for flax. And the reason being is we had access to the James River. We could go straight to Richmond, and then Richmond from the ports it would go out. And flax was used heavily for external markets, rope. You had the Navy. Actually, they would pay you to grow it, especially, it was very labor intensive. But in the 1740s, the House of Burgesses began to encourage people to grow more and more. They would place a bounty of 4 shillings per hundredweight harvested with an additional 2 shilling per hundredweight exported to England. So they were trying to get their Navy up to speed. And we did have sheep, but sheep weren't really valued for any type of meat necessarily. It was really wool.
We started talking about this particular episode being about commemorating revolutions. And so I think wars probably played a tremendous impact on a lot of life around here. Wars are wars. Wars are disruptive, but wars probably had an impact on agricultural as well. Can you kind of expand on any of the things that either sprung up from or were knocked away?
Decimated.
Yeah.
It decimated this whole area. And in fact, the South has never truly been able to recover to this day. You've been working at a deficit ever since. So, I mean, the first war that was really, really big, of course, was the French and Indian War. That was devastating. It also impacted our routes, too, for cattle driving. Normally you would bring them to port, but we couldn't bring them up to Winchester and such. So that actually created a choke point there and created a lot of issues.
I'm excited to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the settling of our nation and the experiment in government that's followed that has led us through the ideals of the Enlightenment to a unique government. And I'm most excited Botetourt County's role in the founding of this. Botetourt County was an experiment of individuals going to the frontier to make a living through their own toil and the land, which we see in agriculture today having evolved just as we see the nation has evolved over the past 250 years. Particularly meaningful to me for my earliest ancestors to the area that migrated down from Pennsylvania and made their living from the land and took up arms to fight for the ideals of freedom and liberty that we enjoy today.
This area wasn't too settled still. I mean, we're talking about the 1760s when you actually started seeing a decent-sized population. So the big war that would have hit us after we were established was the Civil War. And that was, I mean, I think the big thing that I think about is Buchanan and Hunter's raid in June of 1864. I mean, they completely burned it. Remember, that was devastating, and that was that's what made this whole entire county so great there, was having that transportation of that huge, giant river. I think that's still so overlooked. I know we talk about the reason you settle here, but having that actual point of water transportation straight to the capital of the Confederacy, too, was huge. So to have that cut off was pretty severe for us. And then, of course, you had people taking horses, people taking food, by right during that time to feed. So that was quite devastating. And then after the Civil War, you actually saw fewer farms everywhere, but you saw more farms, fewer farms everywhere, but there were larger farms that were in existence. So you had ones that were kind of the bigger fish.
Wars cause problems, destruction, everything changes in life, and then the war ends. Mm-hmm. And so now it's time to get going again. They return home, new people are coming in. So now what does agriculture look like? Did it jump back into gear, or was it a slow slog, or how do we get back to a vibrant agriculture?
Well, some would say we're still trying to work towards that to this day. we had to start adapting. So the first big thing was in the 1880s. You started to see hay production kind of start to creep up into existence. They adopted the practice of ensilage. So instead of silos that were brick-lined pits and the floors of barns, we'd have a roof over top. They actually had real contraptions this time, so you saw kind of an increase in ingenuity and innovation with farming because you had to. Your old ways weren't going to suffice anymore. You were not going to be able to live and have a true livelihood off the land anymore. You had to make it work, which I think kind of imbued these people from the get-go throughout our history here in this region with kind of a complete resilience and a not desperation, but I'm determined to find a way to make this work no matter how, and I will fight for that and just throw out as many lines as possible and see if anything bites. And they've been very, very good at that, as we'll see with different trends and emerging activities and markets that we kind of start exploring in this area. So, I mean, for instance, we had orchards. Orchards weren't significant until the turn of the 20th century. Then you started seeing them kind of pop up. The Botetourt was the actual principal peach producer in the state. And in 1890, they had a harvest of 63,000 bushels from 130,000 trees. So most of those went straight to canning. But Augusta was the second largest producer in this area, actually, next to us with 10,000 bushels. So you can see how huge we are at 63,000 here versus our neighbor, who was a pretty large producer at 10,000. So now that did decline and lower, and so we never really saw it kind of reach that peak again, but that's pretty massive. That's something to be said for. And I think that canning set us up for what we're going to see in the early 20th century, too, our next kind of thing that we start to delve and explore into.
I was listening to you earlier when you were talking about the yields, that farming yields, how different they were then, but it did make me start thinking a bit about how we have evolved over time. Mm-hmm. And so how do you see that happening?
I mean, still, I think it's that determination. This market didn't work. Oh, this was a good year, but we didn't get those yields again. We're gonna try this, or the market needs this. And they're always finding pockets or something that they can kind of capitalize on. And then once that kind of fizzles or doesn't work the way they plan, they're adaptable. They find their course for their river, basically. And I love that. They're so passionate. Still so passionate. I mean, being devastated again, their whole entire life changed from war to war to war, especially here being the gateway and, this whole entire region. So, of course, we're very close to Shenandoah Valley in here, so some of that history kind of gets a little blurred with those lines and such. But you're the gateway to the west here. You have these major rivers. You have all of this civilization and kind of the heart of politics going on all around you in Virginia. And it's so much going on the periphery too, and I think it's pretty cool to see how it kind of influences their thoughts or doesn't influence them at the same time. They seem very steadfast but innovative. They're stubborn but they're open. It's very interesting.
Chuck, as we listen to Tara take us through history lessons, I think you probably give this a lot of thought as well. What's the future look like for agriculture around here? What do you think we're looking at? Based on what our history has shown us and how Tara has set the table of what's happened in the past?
Well, my hope is that we'll continue to embrace that and figure out better ways of overall doing that, as far as agriculture. And again, I hope that things like this, that we're listening to you talk about the history of this area, which is incredible. I think about how many young people don't know any piece of that history about agriculture and where where the food actually comes from and the from the shoulders and the hands of the people that have come before us, what they did for us and how that's been handed over to us as good stewards for that. So I really think that that the agriculture for us is let me rephrase that. I really hope that we're going to continue to figure out the ways of that we will pay special attention to that and make sure that we're doing what our forefathers had done in the past and not relinquish it because it looks land looks better with a shopping mall on it or something, something like that.
This special edition of the Forgotten Fields Project proudly celebrates the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Our special guests included Mike Beam. We've come to rely on Mike's expertise in local farm history. Also, Chief Ren Herdman of the Central Appalachian Cherokee Tribe, offering a view to Native American culture. And the Botetourt County Historical Society and Museum Incorporated President, Ed Holt, with a message of how our past is connecting to our future. And here in the studio, Chuck Miller, who leads the Garden of Grace. This podcast is so much richer having him join us for a spiritual look at our community and always alerting us to the needs of our neighbors. If you would like to learn more about Botetourt County or Virginia, stop by the Botetourt County Museum. It's located in the historic town of Fincastle.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Forgotten Fields Project. Remember, your likes, downloads, subscriptions, and shares help the podcast grow. Do you have a topic you would like us to explore or a question about our farming community? Simply head to our website, ForgottenFieldsProject.com, and leave us your comment, or reach out to us at info@ForgottenFieldsProject.com. The executive producer is Teresa Reed. Tara Williamson and meteorologist Robin Reed are your hosts. We hope you will join us again next time as we explore more trends in agriculture. And we invite you to explore past episodes wherever you get your podcasts.